Judaism with Soul 16. The real meaning of judgment on Rosh Hashannah. The Gemara in Rosh Hashannah 16a reads as follows. Ba'arba prakim ha'olam nidon. On 4 occasions is the world judged. Be'pesach ala tfua. On Pesach the world is judged on its produce. Ba'atzeres al peros ha'ilan. On Shavuos it's judged on its fruit. Rosh Hashanah kol boy oilam oivrin lefanav kivnei maron. On Rosh Hashanah, each individual passes before God like sheep in single file. Bechag nidonim alamayim. On Sukkot, the world is judged on its water, how much water will fall that year. The Mishnah begins by saying on 4 occasions the world is judged, but only mentions the word judgment 3 times: Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. When it comes to the ultimate day of judgment, Rosh Hashanah, the judgment of man, it doesn't say judgment. All it says is man passes before God like sheep in single file. Why doesn't the Mishnah mention, like it does in the Nisan HaTokef, the highest prayer on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that man is judged, who will live and who will die? Why isn't there a mention of judgment on Rosh Hashanah in the Mishnah itself? The answer lies in the statement the Mishnah says, by calling man a being who passes before God like sheep in single file. This means, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, my Rebbe, it means individuality. We pass before God as individuals, uniquely. That is the uniqueness of Rosh Hashanah. That is the meaning of Rosh Hashanah. We pass before God uniquely as individuals with our own sense of consciousness in our own hands. And God says, what is your consciousness saying to you and to the world? What are you doing here? I sent you into the world for a reason, for a purpose. Are you fulfilling that purpose? Reflect, self-introspect on that purpose, on your sense of being alive. Why are you here? Are you alive? Do you appreciate being alive? What are you doing with the life that I have given you? That's the essence of judgment. Judgment means individuality, uniqueness, purpose, direction. The Gemara in Nida, page 30b, says the following. When a fetus is in the womb of its mother, V'ner dalukloi al roishoi v'tsoife umabit misoifa olam ad soifa olam. When a fetus is in its mother's womb, there is a light, a lamp, a candle lit above its head, and the fetus sees from one end of the world to the other end of the world. The Yavris explains as follows. When the Gemara says that the embryo sees from one end of the world to the other, this means his world, his life, since man himself is a small world unto himself. And while he is a fetus, he sees his beginning and his end. This means that man has a sense within the womb, a baby, a neshama, has a sense that it has a purpose in the world. It sees from one end of the world to the other end of the world. It means it sees its beginning and its end, its purpose, its pathway, and whether it's going to achieve its pathway. Its goal is to achieve its pathway. The question is, every single year we pass before God like sheep and He asks us, are you taking steps toward fulfilling that destiny that you knew in the womb, when you saw from the beginning of the world to the end of the world when you were a fetus? Are you now, every single year, taking stock of yourself and asking, are you fulfilling your tafkid, your purpose in the world? When a man achieves a sense of consciousness when we're alive, especially on Rosh Hashanah, when we come to self-reflect and say, I'm alive, I'm here. What am I doing with my life? Do I appreciate it? Am I actualizing my potential? We always talk about potential, but Rosh Hashanah is a time of actualizing that potential. What am I doing to put into practice my goals, my dreams, my aspirations, my hopes? When we have a sense of consciousness that we are alive, automatically we're drawn to humility, to realize that if I'm conscious of my being alive, then I did not create myself. If I have a consciousness, I have a consciousness that I was given that consciousness by a higher being. I am not the mechuyav hametzius. I am not the cause of the world. I'm not the prime mover of the world. I'm not the prime mover or creator of myself. So on Rosh Hashanah, we pass before God like sheep and recognize that my being alive, is a gift. It has been given to me by a higher power. That's the idea of walking before God in a single file with a sense of humility before God. The Shemi Shmuel quotes the Sifri. Shemi Shmuel in Rosh Hashanah Aleph quotes the Sifri and says, when the Torah says, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim, when God blew into man a living spirit, the Sifri says that Hashem is the shofar blower. When God blew into man a living spirit, God is the blower, God is the shofar blower that blew that living spirit into man. The Shem Mishmul is saying that the blower of life, the blower of the neshama into man is God himself. Which means that on Rosh Hashannah, God blows into man a living spirit once again. That the sound of the shofar, when God blows into man a living spirit, the sound of the shofar is a sound of God blowing an neshama into man. When God blew into Adam a living spirit, he blew from himself. Man de nafach midile nafach, the one who blew from himself. His kaviyachol, the source of all neshamos, the source of all souls, blew from his soul into man. He devolved onto man a dimension of godliness. He devolved into man a dimension of soulness, of aliveness, neshima. Neshima means breath, the breath of God. Neshima means the breath of God, and that's the word of neshama. The neshima that God, the breath of God that God breathed into Adam, is the breath called neshama, called soul. The word neshima is the same word as neshama. When God breathed into Adam, he blew into Adam a living spirit. The sound that came out in the world was the sound of the shofar. Hashem blew a neshama into Adam. The sound that came out in the world was Tkiya. Therefore, every Rosh Hashanah, when we hear the Tkiya, when we hear the sound of the shofar, we're hearing Kiviyachol, the sound of Hashem blowing, reblowing our neshama back into us once again. We are being reassigned our neshama with a new sense of marching papers, a new demand, a new opportunity, a new obligation. That's why we have Gilu Birada. We tremble with joy. How do we tremble with joy? We realize we're alive. It's a schus, it's a joy, it's an opportunity, it's a blessing, a privilege to be alive, and yet at the same time, that aliveness has an obligation that comes with it, an obligation to fulfill our purpose. Alive with purpose. It's enjoying, it's enjoyable, it's enthralling, it's rhapsody to be alive, to breathe in, to survive, to be alive another year, and yet it's also trembling because we have an obligation to our Creator. So when I realize that I am created on Rosh Hashanah, that's the idea of Malchus. I recognize that God is the king over me, that he gave me, he's the Melech, he provided. Malchus means he's the giver. Malchus means he's the giver. He gave me a life, he gave me a soul, he gave me a being, and I'm joyous about that, and I appreciate that, and I reflect upon that. At the same time, I ask myself, what am I doing with that neshama? What am I doing with that soul, with that gift of life? Am I actualizing my potential? That's passing before God in single file on Rosh Hashanah like sheep. And therefore, when we hear the shofar, we're hearing ourselves being recreated. When you hear the shofar, listen to your own soul being recreated. Tkiya. And listen to in what way do you want to recreate yourself on Rosh Hashanah. During the Tkiyos, the Shvarim is the brokenness. The Trua is the brokenness, the breaking of my old ways. The Tkiya is the dream, the aspiration of how I could actualize, dream, look to the future, a straight line. Tkiya, my hopes and dreams. What do I dream about? To actualize my potential, my hopes. That's what the Tkiya is. Tkiya is you and I being recreated. The idea is not to listen whether the shofar blower is going to make it this year. How did he blow this year? The question is, am I going to be recreated this year with the sound of the shofar? That's the time for self-reflection, introspection, to ask myself, am I listening to my God-given tafkid? Am I listening to my obligation, to the gift of life? Tkiya, I'm alive. But also, what is my tafkid with that life? What is my obligation? What is my purpose? Am I achieving that purpose? That is the idea of individuality and uniqueness on Rosh Hashanah. Am I achieving my uniqueness and my individuality for which I was sent into the world? And that's the idea of being standing before God on Rosh Hashanah.